That Great Business Show. Winner, highly commended award. Irish Podcast Awards.
Welcome to episode 193 of That Great Business Show, home of great business tips, insights and opportunities on every episode. The perfect length for your walk. And you can also hear us on board Aer Lingus Long Haul, where we are proud to be their podcast partners. I'm Conal Moran, Fáilte. Lots and lots of people in touch with me asking whether Gianni Matera, the early stage investor who joined us on episode 191, was as nice as he sounded. Short answer, yes he is. He's just a nice, no-nonsense guy who will give 6 companies 30 minutes of his time every Friday if they're trying to raise money. And if you know a very early stage startup in the tech space that is hoping to fund, then make sure that they do listen back to it's actually episode 192, I should have said, episode 192 for Gianni Matera. On this episode, which is 193, we have SFA. That's the Small Firms Association, of course, and their 4 just demands. And if you fancy going for that big job, we have some great hacks to help you land in the C-suite. In business, controlling costs is essential. That includes your business fleet's fuel costs. Maxall, a family-owned business since 1920, are big supporters of That Great Business Show. Maxall fuel cards offer tailored solutions for transport fleets of all sizes, delivering efficient fuel cost management for your business at over 700 service stations nationwide. The Maxall dedicated fuel card team wants to hear from you at maxall.ie/fuel cards. The SFA, the Small Firms Association, part of big employer group IBEC, has welcomed the recent $257 million government package to help smaller businesses, but they say more, much more is needed. The association has 4 key demands that they want government action on. They want more done to cut business costs, they want an easing of the tax burden, upskilling of the workforce, and better infrastructure, which all seems fair and reasonable to us. David Broderick has been director of the SFA for just over a year, and he joins me now in studio. Welcome to That Great Business Show, David.
Thanks for having me, Cole.
The 4 just demands. That's what you have.
Yes.
Now, come here to me.
Yeah.
I'm looking at these. You want cutting of business costs, easing of the tax burden, upskilling of the workforce, and better infrastructure. Well, you certainly can't have better infrastructure unless we're paying taxes. So people want their taxes cut, fine, but you can't square the circle or circle the square or do whatever. Discuss.
Well, it's a lot about being targeted at the moment, and it's to people who, look, small businesses represent 98% of all businesses in Ireland. They're the backbone of the society. They're in every town and village across the country.
Yeah, we all say that all the time. But I should have mentioned that you have form here because you come from a family business and you have previously told me that you worked your little socks off in the family business a long time ago.
That's true. Yeah, my mother started a business in the basement of her house in 1982 because she didn't want to put us in a creche. So she saw a woman run into my uncle's pub, which is in town, and she was sitting outside waiting for him. And she saw a woman with a cake in her hand, and she said, "What's the story there?" And he said, "Oh, that's just a lady who makes cakes and drops them into us." And she said, "I can do that." So she then started making desserts and cakes in the basement of our house. And it's now in over 30 countries around the world.
It's unbelievable. That is fantastic. And you told me a far more involved story than that. As one day we might actually investigate that. But one of the things you also told me was that as a young fella, you were sent off to both deliver late, as in when the deliveries were late, but also to collect the cash.
Yeah, Colin should kill me for this. Never giving away the secrets. But I certainly think that's where I learned a lot of my customer service, I would say. So because
you were sent in as a little fella to when the delivery couldn't be made or wasn't made or was late or whatever, and you put on that sweet smile.
Yeah, so one of the large department stores in town would always want their cakes by 10 a.m. in the morning because that was a thing. But sure, my mum had 4 boys to rear, and if one of us had Gaelic training or something like that, sometimes it would be a bit late. So there was one particular story where we were slightly later than normal, and I was sent up the stairs in the lift, and I was tasked with smoothing over the situation. But I think that lady saw through me. She wanted to go down and get my mother out of the basement to bring her up. But yeah, look, I think that's where it comes from. We grew up with that business in our house.
And I love it. I love it because I think it just teaches you so many things. It also taught you how to collect the cash.
It is indeed. Cash is king. And if the cash doesn't come in, you won't be in business for too much longer. But it was great. Like the house phone at home, even as small as we were, that would be them phoning in orders. This was the 80s. This is how it was done. And you'd have to take down the order in the book and things. And God help you if you got it wrong.
I'm sure you did, but not your fault. So, as I say, you have a proper background in, I'd call it, proper business. But these your four demands there, of course they make sense, except that, first of all, I don't believe the government listens terribly carefully to the businesses, including the 98% of 50
employees or less.
Yeah, that it is. It's like the GAA. It's part of what we are. And they probably would never miss a football match or a hurling match, but they don't seem to give full ear, or do they? Is this your view?
Yeah, look, as you said at the start, I'm just over a year in the role, and it is my first role like this in terms of getting in front of government. And I would say that after the budget last year, small businesses definitely felt like a bit of an afterthought, and we could see what was coming. We could see coming down the line. So we put together our policy priorities document in anticipation for an election, which we'll obviously have at some point I'm not sure what the betting is now, but we will have it at some stage before. I think it has some before February. So we put together this policy document, and it is, the soundings with our change in our Taoiseach Simon Harris and Minister Peter Burke. I mean, the soundings have to say, have been very good since they've come into office. I actually met Peter Burke and presented this document to him about 6 weeks before he actually got the job as Minister for Enterprise. So we are moving in the right direction. I do think they are listening. I have to say, having been in this role now, you do start, from that announcement that happened last week, about 8 of the items in our document are touched in some way, shape or form of that. So look, that's not our job to do. We're there to represent business interests, and we're there to listen to our members and relay that back to government. And
you also, because you have membership across the sectors, probably know that the numbers of the people in the food and beverage sector who talk to me about how tough it is, they wanted their VAT cut. Where does the SFA stand on a VAT cut? Because I know like cutting VAT for one crowd, everybody else wants it after that. Yeah, no, look, it's so as you said, our members are across the board, and we have restaurants and we have pubs and everybody in our membership. But I think the key word here is targeted. We need targeted supports. So I'm not sure a blanket cut in VAT would be what we're looking for in terms of the cost that would be. There is talk of a targeted support coming out, and it'll be interesting to see. But look, we'll take whatever's there in terms of businesses. It is so stark at the moment. We do actually have. I had a member on the phone to me on Friday. He was in tears. He absolutely was in tears. He just felt he'd nowhere to go. His margin had been completely eroded. Actually, ironically, his business actually it supplies into the restaurant trade, so he's very heavily hit by it, even though that's not his core product. But he just said, look, I've been trying to avoid this, but I'm just going to have to close the doors. There's nothing I can do. So, but this is how serious the nature is, That's what I'm hearing. It's not boys crying wolf. It is definitely not. And it's a little bit frustrating to hear some of that rhetoric around. I don't think it's helpful. And I will say, look, the experience economy and retail are the most exposed. But I have to tell you, we're hearing it across the board. You're hearing this in all businesses. Margins are just being completely squeezed. The cost base is unsustainable. Some of the things that are going on at the moment are making us uncompetitive as a country, and it just has to stop. Our businesses are going to close. Name some names or name some of the issues that are really affecting. The cost of energy in this country, for example, is completely off the scale. Yeah. And is that because, and I'm going to put words into your mouth now, so be careful, is that because it's a causative or it's a legacy that the energy suppliers here a long time ago were basically a monopoly now, so therefore we expect to be hit or huge energy cost?
Yeah, look, energy is a huge cost. And in terms of the specific or the historic side of where that came from, that's not for me to answer. But it is one of many, many costs at the moment. Insurance is still an incredibly high cost, but tax and labour, the labour costs that are out there at the moment are what's really killing businesses. And I suppose, look, when you look at the raft of regulations that happened over the last few months, which, by the way, we're in favour of raising the minimum wage. We're in favour of statutory sick days, but just too much came too soon. And when you're a small business, as opposed to one of these large businesses who can, which is still a problem for them, by the way, but at least they have the HR department. When you're talking to my members, they are the HR department. They're the CEO, the MD, the head of sales, and everything else in between. So, as I said, it's the timing and the raft of regulations that came in. It's just created a perfect storm for small businesses, and it's becoming unsustainable for them. And unfortunately, more are going to close.
Well, what does the government do? They have an electorate who want to buy houses. That's probably even so far down the road. They want to stay in accommodation and they have to eat. Yeah. So therefore, they are looking for their living wage. And you say that you're for that. But to pay the living wage, that has to come out of the business. So square the circle again.
Well, it was a scale of the jump and the timing of the jump that came in. So it was a jump of over 12% in 1 year. And that's a huge jump. When you look at the margins of the businesses that we talked about, that's just simply unsustainable. But I mean, even the government report themselves, they brought out a report on the change in working conditions. And they've identified that over the next couple of years, these costs are going to increase by 30%, and of which 20% is government imposed. So when you've had a period of time where you had, a war in Ukraine, you had COVID, a lot of these things were outside of government control. I think the challenge now at the moment, and that there is a frustration among the membership, is that a lot of these are government imposed, and we have control over that.
And one other thing that people could or might be able to do is to upskill themselves or be upskilled. This is something very, very close to your heart, because we've been backed here on the podcast by Mentors Work, and something we really, really do believe in, and that is part of the upskilling. It's probably the only future we have, trying to get the entire workforce moving up the ladder.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Mentors Work is yes, it's part of the SFA in partnership with SkillNet Ireland. And I love the mentor. I was a mentor myself, actually. I was made redundant during COVID, and I had to go and find a job for myself. And I ended up working as a consultant in Kildare, working on the business continuity vouchers. So I saw firsthand the experience of having a mentor and having somebody there that can guide you through the business, because business leadership's a really lonely place. And certainly with the companies that we look at and the people who are on Mentors Work, they get the time to just take their head up out of the business, talk to somebody who is one of the mentors, who's a lot of experience, who's done this before. Like, they do have the answers. They know it themselves. They just need to bounce it off somebody. And that's the beauty of having a mentor and being able to step away from your business.
Now, tell me the truth. Have you got a mentor?
I do. I would have two. I would have two. They're not official. Cost me a pint as opposed to.
But it doesn't matter how you do it, isn't it?
It doesn't matter. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
And so many people, business is business at the end of the day. And
And I think I've also made the mistake of having the wrong mentor in the past, of having a friend as opposed to a mentor.
That's a fair point. Okay, I'm hearing it.
And certainly one or two of the decisions I took, I think they thought, that's what I wanted to do. And,
so that's great, David.
That's great. Yeah, go for that. Go for that. And it was only with hindsight, they kind of, a real mentor will say, well, hang on a second here. What's this? What's it going to do for you? What's it going to do for your career? Whereas a friend might sometimes say, that'll be grand. Try that and see how you get on. Whereas a real mentor will take that objective look at it. And I find people in those positions, they've been through the ringer themselves, and they want to give back their time. And they're probably the best types of mentors.
There is a government surplus at the moment. There probably will be for maybe 1 or 2 more years after that. Who knows? But who knows anyway. What would you do with that surplus in terms of, would you spend it on upskilling, or would you prefer to spend it on that? You mentioned infrastructure, and anybody who was in Dublin a week ago, holy God almighty, the infrastructure in Dublin is just nuts. And that's just here. And I don't want to be Dublin-centric. Go down to Galway. Good luck trying to get through Galway. What would your priority be?
I think a long-term investment in infrastructure is definitely something that's needed.
Such as?
I think a lot could be. You're catching me now.
Do you want to dig holes and put buses under the road, or do you want to put in trams, or do you want to?
It depends. I mean, like if you look at, you've mentioned yourself in terms of Galway City, for example. I mean, that would be a different solution down there as it will be up here in Dublin. So it does just depend on that.
What about my own favourite? I want to see high-speed trains going from Dublin to Galway or Dublin to Cork. To do it in an hour or half an hour, so it could be done.
I've often thought that, actually, and this isn't an official statement here, but if you looked at a high-speed train, if you looked at a high-speed train that ran, and a kind of an X and a Y axis across how much of a difference would that make?
Massive.
And it would be huge.
Our little island is teeny. And in Spain, the Spanish only started 30 years ago putting in their high-speed trains. They are now simply incredible. And we could, because we have a surplus. And it doesn't matter if we didn't have a surplus, it's money that has to be spent.
No, I would agree. And look, we're just talking about transport. I think one of the biggest disgraces is that we've got a children's hospital down in James's Gate with no children, and that cost a fortune. I mean, that's just infuriating. So it just depends on what the topic is, but certainly...
So we've got great value for money there.
I think let's not go there now, to be honest. Well, I just think it's and look, the health system as well.
So where would you are now speaking, we'll go back again, put on your official SFA hat. What would you spend? Where would you spend the money on? Because, you have to make choices. Yeah,
I think the biggest, so just certainly talking from a small business point of view, the biggest and the most efficient thing I think that could be done lately is a targeted PRSI rebate. I think that's the quickest, most efficient way.
How would that work? Explain that to me.
So it would work the same. I mean, revenue takes money out of accounts all the time. And we saw with the temporary wage subsidy scheme, for example, they were able to put it back in. It would be up to a government to make a decision as to who's in and out of the net. So we're not saying that this would be for everybody, certainly not in terms of a rebate. But those most affected, say with the recent changes in the minimum wage, if you could target it and they would get a proportion of their PRSI back in form of a rebate.
But the PRSI is, I don't know why they bother with this sham of, it's a tax. It's pure and simple, a tax. And would it not simplify the entire world just to call it a tax and roll in the RTE license fee and everything else? I don't understand why we go on, along with all this stuff of not calling taxes.
I think we've just ended up there. I think we've one of the most complicated tax systems around. So, look, we've often been calling for a simplification of, and I think that would be so welcome. I mean, I sit on Revenue's tax simplification group, so I sit on there to represent SMEs. And
it's not as if...
Sorry?
Is there anything happening?
There's a lot of things happening, actually. I have to say, a lot of things around the website, and I actually probably can't say too much, actually, because the report's actually due to come out soon.
Oh, good. Well, at least we look forward to that. That's
good. Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. No, but it's certainly, look, everybody wants to make things simpler and more efficient. But I think when you look at our tax system...
who do your taxes.
Well, they were the ones kind of stepping up and down the most, I have to say, in terms of where they see the challenges. But look, we have just ended up there with a tax system. It is far too complex. It's far too complicated. And look, from our point of view as well, one thing in the docket, is a cut in capital gains tax. We've often said that. And I say that because you start a business, you set up, you pay your VAT, you pay all these things, you pay your taxes all throughout your career. You should be allowed to exit your business at a reasonable cost. I mean, this, another frustrating, I think those people who say, profit's a dirty word. I mean, we need to run a business.
Do you actually get that anymore? I mean, I think you do. Go back some decades, and certainly that was just the standard prayer.
I think you would do it. Well, look, it depends on the context, but I do think people look, someone exits their business for X amount of money, and they go, the lucky git. Hang on, they worked behind office, and the stress.
Came up with the idea, worked, as you say, and gave up everything else.
And the stress. I mean, there's one particular person, I won't say, but you'll probably figure it out. And the business on the outside looked really, really successful. And they were on television and things at the time. And I know that for a fact that business owner, who was employing 100 people at the time, on a Friday evening, was hopping in the car at 3 o'clock, driving as fast as they could down to the bank to lodge the wages for the staff. And this is the type of thing that business owners go through week in, week out.
I had Gianni Matera on the podcast last week, and what he said, I said, who would he hire in a heartbeat? And he gave me a brilliant answer. He said nobody, because he had run a business with 65 people. He says, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you do.
it cuts both ways.
It's funny, and you would see that a lot in terms of the management and people who manage their business. It's being able to manage the people properly. But I mean, look, it goes back to that cash thing in terms of there's so much stress going on in the business. And a lot of my members would say when we talk about the minimum wage, they've often said, if you added up the hours that I do, I get paid way less than minimum wage to work my behind off to make sure that my staff gets that. And look, they do want, of course they want to look after their staff, and we do. But the problem with this change in minimum wage is the effect that it's pumped right up the chain. So it's
because there's relativity, and
absolutely
everybody gets their 12%.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have someone who's been with you for 2 or 3 years, John or Mary, and they've worked their way up to €13 after 2 years, and now you're going to have a situation where someone's going to come in the door on 12.70. What are they going to say? They're going to say, well, I want 15. Do you know what I mean? So, and that's fair enough, but that's the way it's going to happen.
Go back again and explain to me in greater detail your targeted PRSI. What do you want to do there? Just give me an example of John or Mary.
Yeah, so if it's more the business owner. So if you have 20 staff and they've all had the 12% increase in minimum wage now, so they're overly exposed to that area, that the government can make a decision as to what the parameters are. And it's not for me to say that because that would have the cost implications, but they make a decision that if you're overly exposed to the minimum wage under these circumstances, they would give the business owner back some of the PRSI that they paid in those staff.
Okay.
And there's lots of parameters as to what they can do and who's in and out, because there would be a cost implication.
And is government listening to that one?
I think it's a targeted solution, yes. I would think they are listening. There is implications on it, and how do they set the parameters?
You must have chatted to somebody about those implications. Are we talking about 10 million, 100 million, 1,000 million? I mean, how many?
In terms of a cost, it would all affect. It is something that we looked at, but it all depend on the parameters that are there. If you looked at the increase of cost of doing business scheme, for example, this thing of jam spread too thin in terms of, that was a lot of money. It was 257 million, and companies didn't take it up, and that was because it wasn't targeted to where it was needed, and that's why we'd like to see something happening. Now, don't get me wrong, the businesses who got it and the recent announcement as well of the double payment is definitely very welcome, and it is moving in the right direction. We're just kind of looking at what the next scheme is and what can we learn from that and how can we make it more targeted. And we've seen this, T-Best when it first came out, far too complicated. And then there was the changes, and there was a big learning in the increased cost of doing business scheme, I have to say, from government in terms of how to do it.
If there has to be learnings at the launch of these things, would they not have done the learnings before launching these things? Does it not make sense to test things?
Yes, it will be, and to listen. Like, we would sit on a lot of different groups with them, so we can come up with the solutions, and we are. But look, they have to make decisions. They're politicians in power, and that's their job. So I think sometimes these schemes are in a rush to get them out, which is, if that's coming from the right place, then that's fair enough. But yeah, look, the PRSI rebate for us is quick, easy, efficient. Revenue are fantastic at what they do. And, we think they could get this up and running very quickly.
I spent the weekend looking at polls for elections and stuff. So things are, the sands are shifting, I think. But if there were the possibility, and there was a possibility for a while there, of a left-leaning or maybe a reasonably left-leaning government, would that concern the SFA?
Well, look, what we have done, it doesn't matter who gets into power. So what we've done, and the reason I mentioned meeting Peter Burke, we've targeted every single political party, and we went out and we spoke to them, and we speak to them the same way, and we tell them what the issues are. And the small business issues will remain the small business issues, regardless of who gets into power. What the SFA has been doing is lobbying and making sure that whoever does get in, whatever the makeup of the next government, at least small business is at the forefront of their thoughts.
There must be a concern as well in the SFA about the lack or absence of competitive capital, I'll call it. In other words, you have your 2.5 banks or 3 banks or anything that you could suggest doing there. The credit unions, I know, are trying to now get involved.
Yeah, no.
That is a good thing, I presume.
There's definitely a good thing going on from the credit unions, and like the likes of the SBCI, is doing fantastic work in the market. If you look at MicroFinance Ireland as well, that was another thing that we would have asked government for in terms of increasing their loan capacity up to 50,000. Look, it is worrying. Competition is always good in the markets, but I think we've seen before that that's not going to change anytime soon. It is very concerning though, because what my members want is obviously they prefer a yes when they go for a loan, but if they don't get a yes, they want a quick no. And that probably wasn't happening and isn't happening. And there's a lot of work goes into some of these applications. And I did speak to a couple of members, and they said, "Look, I'm not going talking to the banks again. I've been hurt before," sort of thing. And I said, "Well, where are you getting it?" And they said, "Well, I'm talking to an alternative lender." And I said, they turned around and I said, "Did you have a look at the rate?" And he said, "I didn't even look at the rate. I'll get that money into my bank and I'll deal with it then." Which, look, isn't, the soundest, smartest way of thinking of it. No. But these entrepreneurs, they want to go on the passion that they have within them.
Oh yeah, that's the stuff we love. Yeah,
but that's the thing. So they will go on and they said, "We'll make it work. I need cash. I need cash in the business now. That's the quickest way to get it. Let's take it. Away we go. We'll figure that out."
And the other one where there's no competition seems to be in the insurance industry. Again, it was all going to change, and we're all going to have much, much lower costs. And in fact, if anything, it seems to be going up again, particularly on the commercial side.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there was some positive moves. We would have met with Minister Carol McNeill as well, and she certainly did some good work in there. But it's just one of those stubbornly high costs that just doesn't go away, and it's extremely frustrating as well. If it's insurance is supposed to mitigate against risk, but if you actually look at some of what's in these policies, I mean, there's not too much risk in there, from what we're seeing, and that's frustrating as well. But there has been step forwards, but there's certainly more that can be done in terms of reform.
This is now I'm going off on a little tangent here because I like to do that kind of thing. Is back in the day, people in Ireland were very good on co-ops and stuff like that. Do you ever dream that the SFA/IBEC could set up a co-op to challenge? Now, of course, there's an internal conflict here because the members of IBEC happen to be banks and insurance companies as well. But to set up alternatives when there isn't competition, the obvious thing is to get alternatives to provide that competition. Sure,
yeah, but I mean, look, there have been, like I said, the likes of MicroFinance Ireland, they were doing fantastic work, and the SBCI. So there is a bit of movement in that direction. But yeah, you can't beat good old-fashioned competition, and obviously we're not that an attractive a nation, for those particular banks to come in, or we would have seen it by now.
Any last-minute request that you can think of is just one of the other ones that may not even be in your document, but something that is close to your heart?
No, I certainly think, and it is in the document, but the voucher system and a training voucher system, but based on the principle of cost reimbursement. So there are plenty of schemes and things like Mentors Work, for example. You can go on for free from that, which is great. But there's the time spent out of the office, out of the factory, and that's a huge cost. I would also look after Childhood Services Ireland as well. That's a big, big problem for the childcare sector, is actually letting the people out of the childcare setting to go on training courses, because then they don't have someone in ratio. So if you had a training voucher, if you unlocked the National Training Fund, which we hope will be happening very soon, and you could do a principle of cost reimbursement. So if Connell's out of the office for the day, that there is X amount goes back to the employer. That would be helpful.
And what does the employer do with that? Hire somebody else while there's somebody's away training or something
exactly,
like that?
Depending on...
God, that sounds very clunky or unwieldy,
well, a voucher's a good thing. Vouchers have good things, and they've worked in the past. It's a format of getting the money out of, hopefully, the National Training Fund and back into the employer's pockets, which is a bit of a bugbear at the moment.
Final question to you. We ask everybody this. Who would David Broderick hire in a heartbeat?
Well, I've a full new team since I started, so hopefully I've done a lot of hiring, and I'm very proud of what I have at the moment. I suppose, look, there's the cheesy option. I would love to hire Michael O'Leary to run the HSE. I think that would be a great one. I think he would sort that out pretty quickly. But I have to say, look, I've grown up in a house with a female entrepreneur who is fantastic. Resilience is something that you look for in people, and I've seen a lot of resilience there. So I would hire my mother in a heartbeat.
And tell them the story that you told me. She's of an age, we won't say exactly what age.
You won't, she'll find you.
But she's still out there selling.
Did
you tell me that she was out in the airport?
Every Friday morning, she's in Dublin Airport doing a few hours with samples.
I love that.
Yeah. It's,
do you think
it's
we should come and talk to me?
I'll ask her for you. I'll put in a good word.
Because I love it.
Yeah. And she loves it. And
of course she does. That's why she's out there.
There's been a couple of tricky times lately, but it's unbelievable. Like, she came home from holidays there recently. She was tired. I said, "You're not going to the airport tomorrow?" She said, "I am. Yeah, that's my job. Of course I'm going."
Love it.
It's brilliant.
Are we to mention the age? I mean,
don't mention the age. I'd be killed.
Okay. Anyway,
I didn't even tell you. Wink, wink.
Okay. Oh, okay. David Broderick, thank you so much for joining us on That Great Business Show.
That Great Business Show.
Maxol, a family-owned business since 1920, launched Homegrown at Maxol to support local growing businesses by distributing their product across the Maxol network in the Republic of Ireland. In partnership with Champion Green, Maxol invites local SMEs and startups in the food and drink sector to enter year 2 of the Homegrown at Maxol programme. Listen back to previous winners on episode 153 of That Great Business Show, and for more details, see maxol.ie/homegrown.
De facto, the revolutionary shaving oil, changing the face of shaving. For the smoothest shave of your life, just add water. No more lathering up or cleaning up afterward. Just add a few drops of water and you're ready to go. De facto's blend of all natural oils hydrates and protects your skin. Perfect for all skin types and lasts so much longer than traditional foams or gels. De facto, a shaving revolution. Just add water. Available from selected pharmacies and from defactoshave.com.
That Great Business Show. Winner, highly commended award. Irish Podcast Awards.
Next up, we have a headhunter in studio, and that's because we love learning insider hacks or tips on how to successfully navigate your way to the top of life's greasy pole. Barry Guiney's formal title seems to be headhunter with worldwide recruitment firms Odgers Bernston. But that's not all. I like to check out the unusual in people's CVs, and in this case I see that Barry is both honorary secretary at UCC Rugby Club. He's also a certified Scrum Master, but as Mr. Spock would say, not scrums as we know it, but a different type of thing altogether. Barry Guiney explains all. What is a Scrum Master?
Wow, I didn't expect us to go back there at the start, Conal. So a Scrum Master is, I guess, a title that comes from the Agile Manifesto for software development. So that harks back to my days, I guess, in the software industry, leading software teams, and I suppose being part of the transformation in those days from what was known as the waterfall methodology to the Agile methodology. And the Scrum Master, I guess, it is borrowed from rugby, actually, the idea of a Scrum. It was actually in Japan and the Toyota way that adopted the term. And what it literally is about that. It's about bringing everybody together on a daily basis, understand what you're doing, understand what your plans are, understand what challenges you have to achieve your next set of goals.
And it's still being used.
It absolutely is still being used, yeah.
So it came out of Toyota. I never knew that because every day's a school day on this podcast. So you moved out of that and you went headhunting. Why?
Sure. So I guess headhunting, I guess it's a more common name for the service that we provide, which is that of executive search, which is a specialized form of recruitment, mostly, I suppose, deployed for strategic hires, senior hires, C-suite and the like. I prefer the word matchmaker. We believe we have a strong influence in building high-performing leadership teams for our clients. And we also have the opportunity to change the lives and careers of our candidates.
What is happening out there? There was the Great Resignation. Now I read in the UK media that there's the Great Stay, that they're all going back to stay. Then there are the big tech layoffs. And then recently we saw IBM talking about 800 hires. And I see that Intel may be about to invest 11 billion here. What's going on?
Yeah, it's volatile, Conal. There's no doubt about that. Fantastic news from IBM, and well done to the local management and I suppose the Irish agencies that were involved in that. I can only assume the IDA had a strong influence as well. That's great news. It's probably the biggest piece of good news we've heard from big tech in these parts for a couple of years. There certainly was a ramp up in hiring during, I suppose, what we're calling the pandemic period now. Then there was a correction and there have been layoffs and there have been people obviously have been adversely affected by that. But what it does mean, hopefully from a positive point of view, is that you have a very experienced, very skilled set of Irish technology executives who are now more available to Indigenous firms than they were before.
Now, that's the answer to the question I didn't post. Is that what's happening? Is that the senior people are, I won't say hanging around, nobody hangs around, but they are available, yeah?
They are available. So they were quite difficult for Indigenous firms to attract during that growth period. They were very well rewarded. Stock market returns were very high. So it was very hard to bring someone from an environment, in the big multinational sector to the indigenous firms, despite the type of innovation and growth opportunity that lay there also. But that now, where people's, I suppose, earning opportunities have been constrained, or they have possibly been made redundant, they are now starting to transition across, or certainly become available to the indigenous firms, and can be introduced, for example, through a firm like ourselves, once we're engaged by an indigenous company to do those placements.
You missed the opportunity to say Odgers Bernstein.
I did miss the opportunity to say Odgers Bernstein, but it's funny.
That's three.
Okay.
Odgers Bernstein.
Okay.
I was looking up Odgers,
Yes.
if I can call it shortened.
Yes.
Odgers. Am I allowed to do that?
You certainly are.
And my little chat GPT, which I'm falling in love with, decided that you have between 1,001 and 5,000 employees. How big is it? You've got locations literally all over the world.
You certainly do, Conal. We have 62 offices around the world.
Uruguay,
yes. Uruguay. We're in Chile. We're in Brazil, a number of offices in Brazil. We're in all of the major, I suppose, European capitals. The centre of gravity is in the UK, where Mr. Odgers, Ian Odgers, originally founded the firm. He then partnered with a gentleman, Mr. Bernstein, who I believe was Belgian, and hence, I suppose, maybe the English-speaking part of our company, and maybe the European mainland, continental part came together at that time. So we have a big global network of partners, a big global network of researchers. We're very proud, I suppose, of how well we collaborate together. We really emphasize that across what we call our technology practice, which is the area of our business that services the firms that are in the technology industry.
And I won't keep you in suspense any longer, because the real reason that you're here is you want to talk to me about the Scale Up Collective.
Sure, yeah. So I guess one of the things we learned in Odgers over the last number of years, that investor-backed businesses and the investors themselves found it hard to engage with a leading search firm like Odgers. They didn't really know which practice to go to, or if we had necessarily the right track record. So Scale Up Collective evolved out of our desire to make executive search accessible to those scaling businesses. And those scaling businesses are not necessarily startups, Conal. They're businesses that have achieved probably product market fit, achieved reasonably significant revenues, and are now ready to take the next leap. Maybe they've come in as maybe a private equity investors come in. Maybe they've got a plan, for example, to get from a certain revenue to twice that over 5 years, that sort of thing. And what we would love to help them to do is to bring in the type of strategic executive that can drive that growth, and of course bring that track record with them.
Okay, I'm trying to second guess you here. Did you sit in a room all together and say, how are we going to get into these, as you say, scaling companies? You're not at the startup level.
No.
Scaling.
So I suppose the genesis of it came out of discussions in our global technology practice, led by our global technology practice leader, Mike Drew, in London, in the UK. And I suppose what we understood from our meetings is that we actually had a lot more experience and track record working with these investors and investor-backed businesses than we even realized as a company. On top of that, we had people within the firm who had experience working in these type of companies. So going back to the Scrum Master question you asked a while ago, that harks back to my background in a number of investor-backed businesses and businesses that did scale and go to successful exits.
When you say that you had a successful exit, you still chose to become a so-called headhunter.
Yeah, so look, I guess I arrived at a time in my career, Conal, that I realized that where I measured my successes was really around the teams that I had built, how they had grown, and the successes that they achieved. And what's quite interesting when you're working with technology people is where they're mostly motivated by is to see their work made use of. So many of them have built demos, have built, what's the word I'm looking for? Provision releases, work that never finds its way into the open market. And what they
You mean that they're just doing demos or...
Demos or beta releases and things like that. Projects can get cancelled. Even the biggest companies, I'm going back to Microsoft days, full projects can get cancelled after years, this sort of thing. And I suppose going back to me, I suppose I was probably always the accidental technologist. I did study computer science in UCC, in the University in Cork. I did feel that I would never work in technology. I did end up in Microsoft and was very lucky to do so, and spent the bones of 10 years there.
I laugh at what we all dream of, think we won't do this. Or, for example, I was once going to be a surgeon. Could you believe it? God love medicine, I'll tell you.
I think I trust you.
If ever I was given a scalpel. Tell me about what's going on as in terms of the absences, the lacks that we have in the Irish marketplace that you say, Christ, we could use far more of this type of engineer or this type of technologist or whatever. What is not happening out there?
Yeah, so Conal, we don't really look through that lens, right? We focus very much on the leadership roles, the C-suite roles. So what we, I suppose, see now is a demand for executives that can bring companies towards the revenue targets that they have. So going back a couple of years where finance was relatively cheap, interest rates were low, the majority of tech businesses wanted to build. They wanted a product officer. They wanted a chief technology officer. It was grow through building. Then all of a sudden, interest rates went up. They decided they needed to sell. They needed to bring in revenue. I was going to say at all costs, but they certainly to be driving the business towards that. So that would be the biggest demand, would be those who have real, genuine experience of bringing revenue growth. On top of that, then, you have businesses that have been through their funding cycles, and there's a real strong appetite from the leadership, from the investors, to get to that, what we would call the liquidity event. That might be the trade sale, that might be the IPO, the investment, that sort of thing.
Payday.
Payday, well said, thank you. Can I borrow that? So those executives that have been through those type of successful exits would be in huge demand.
Once upon a time, they did not exist in this country, I can assure you.
True.
Are there lots of them now? Are there lots of well-blooded individuals?
Yeah, there certainly are more. I suppose we're probably at a phase now in the Irish ecosystem, if I can call it that, whereby those well-blooded individuals, as you described them, are there, have had some exits over the last 20 years. But now there's a greater ambition to go global, to have even greater exits, to do, maybe a more ambitious initial public offering onto the stock markets, or, the equivalent of that. So less of an appetite, to get to market, to get your initial revenues and to get out.
But now that's interesting that you say that, because it is the bane of Enterprise Ireland's life, is that understandably, if you have put a lot of sweat and tears into your company, it's nice to take some cash off the table.
Sure.
And Irish people tend to do so at about 20, 30 million valuation. But they want to go, at least EI would love us to go to 200 or 300 million valuation. You're seeing a shift there, are you?
There is a shift. I think Enterprise Ireland are very aware of that and are starting to put in place, I suppose, the right supports to enable that. There's some really interesting communities building up in Dublin now. There's Scale Ireland.
Go on. So I was just going to ask you, name those tunes. Yeah.
Scale Ireland. Another example is Endeavour Ireland. And those are, in their own right, they're slightly different, but they're effectively communities that advocate for these scale-ups, give them the kind of peer and mentor networks that they need to enable them to create those growth opportunities and achieve that growth from an Irish base. And I suppose what you're trying to do is maybe replicate what the likes of Stripe has done or an Intercom has done maybe over maybe the last 10 or 15 years. But in those cases and at that time, I suppose they had to go away before they came back. They both went to the States.
Ah, right? Yeah. And they learned that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, are you seeing any difference in the types of people, be they in Stripe or wherever, and you don't have to name them now, but where they were educated in that American MBA way versus a European or an Irish MBA? What I'm trying to get to is you look at these huge American corporations.
Sure.
They are run by the same type of person.
Sure.
I won't even go into the details, but they are just bred. It's like an army, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're just bred to run corporations.
Yeah.
They're not in any sense, they're not entrepreneurs in that sense.
Sure. And many of them are ex-army, as it turns out, Conal, and I hark back to Microsoft days in that regard. So I wonder, is it the education? I mean, I know in the case of the Collison brothers, it is the American education. If I'm correct, it was MIT maybe that they went to and the like. I wonder, is it firstly a new generation, a bigger ambition, a more self-confident generation of young Irish people? I wonder, is it, I suppose, a cross-pollination of those who have learned their skills, who've learned how to operate at real scale in the big international tech firms that are operating in Ireland? And those skills and that experience is now translating and becoming available to the Irish businesses, and I suppose generating a whole new generation of founders.
One of the things that would be personal to me is that when I see some of these people and what they're paid, now at the end of the day, they're management. I see no boundary to people who found a business, grow a business, take as much money as you want off the table because you have made it.
Sure.
When you are in the top C-suite, as you like to call it, in an organization, the building has been done. You're just there to drive the bus.
Sure.
And yet they can be paid a vast amount of money. And I sometimes wonder, what happened? Where did that happen? Or how did that happen?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. And I suppose the analogy that we use is slightly different in that it's not maybe drive a bus, but maybe it's the person who built the rocket isn't the best person to fly the rocket.
Which I appreciate. But therefore, the man or person who built the rocket should get due reward. But then you bring in your pilot.
Yes.
And do you ever say to yourself when you see job vacancies and you say, good God, that's a lot of money for that job?
Absolutely. And I guess there is metrics out there to show the relative reward of a CEO in the US now compared to maybe what it was 30 years ago.
And it's off the scale.
It is absolutely off the scale.
350 times or whatever the base worker, or it's just nuts.
Yeah. I think the best stories, Con Louis, here is of maybe the commercial executive that joins the technologist founder and gets the positive exit for the technologist founder that founder wouldn't have necessarily got themselves.
Okay, they are due a bonus for that.
Sure.
I'm talking about recurring income, i.e. their salary, just to run the bus or to drive the rocket or do whatever.
Okay. I guess what is it related to? What are they being paid for? Is their goal to generate profits? Is their goal to generate shareholder returns? Are they achieving those goals? And if that's the case, then they probably should be rewarded.
But of course, it's all interlinked, as we all know. So therefore, it suits certain individuals on the remuneration committee and or the chair and the vice chair to be linked somewhere along the line to the zillions of dollars or pounds or euros or whatever that the CEO gets. No? Or am I just being too cynical?
I hope not, and I think if you operate in the Irish market now, the level of compliance and regulation that executives and non-executives at board level are under is very, I suppose, intensive.
But I'm not suggesting for a second that there's no governance or poor compliance. I'm just talking about the relativities of salaries and income that people can justify.
Yeah, look, I suppose one of the most noteworthy ones going on at the moment is with Elon Musk and Tesla in the US.
What's he trying to sell and pay himself? 50 billion or something?
Something extraordinary like that. And
that's absolute, I can use the word because I can. Well, it's absolute bullshit.
Sure. It would seem to be ludicrous. And I guess in the context of the questions, maybe it's good news that the board turned it down.
Yeah. And if he were to own the shares, which he does, and if they go to $1 billion each, I have no issues or problems with that.
Sure.
It's the other stuff of trying to get the sneaky money out the back door.
Sure.
No? Yes? No?
Yeah. Look, I suppose it's not something that I or we experience directly in the Irish market. I think while the CEOs, are well rewarded, no doubt about that, I don't think it's at the levels of the multiples of the large US corporations, which I think is who you're referencing.
Yeah, I mean, they are vast, of course. I mean, those companies.
Yeah.
What is a top CEO in Ireland paid?
Oh, look, it's as long as a piece of string.
But roughly speaking.
Yeah, look, I mean, it can be certainly north of 200,000.
Well north, I'd say.
Yeah. And, depending on the business, the stage it's at, the type of deal they do, it could be 100% on top of their base salary.
Do you see any demand from your international colleagues for Irish executives based in Ireland? Do you cross-pollinate? Do you talk to each other? Do you say, do they ring you up? You mentioned Uruguay, you mentioned Chile. Is that if so many of your Chilean colleagues ring you up, would they say, you wouldn't happen to have an executive who could take over a 2,000-person organization? Do they do that kind of thing?
Absolutely. It's less common in South America or from South America, right? Which mightn't surprise you, but good examples. More common from the UK, more common from Canada, from the US, Australia, and vice versa, right? So for example, if you take the health sectors in Ireland, Canada, UK, Australia, they're quite referenceable to one another in terms of the standards, the qualifications. As we know, many of our educated doctors and nurses and et cetera go to those parts. So there's a big appetite for us on our side to try and find the right talent, be the Irish diaspora or other nationals to come from those markets to Ireland. But also it works the other way as well.
But coming this direction, surely they say, how much tax?
They do. It's a big question, and therefore the overall package has to work for them.
So how frequently would you hear people saying, not worth my while?
It does happen. We're in a confidential process at the moment where we are speaking to people in the US, people in Canada, and we haven't been able to match their expectations, both in terms of the compensation package on offer, but also the relocation on top of that to make it worth their while. So it does happen. But I suppose where we have the most success, Conal, to look at it another way, is with the Irish diaspora or those with Irish connections who tend to make the journey home for kind of the obvious reasons.
Kids.
Life stage, kids,
schools,
family, schools, nostalgia, everything that goes with that.
They want to send them to UCC, to college.
They do want to send them to UCC and hopefully play for the rugby team.
Tell me this about the relocation. How much does it cost to relocate? And I have no idea whether it's €10 or 10,000 or 10,100 or whatever.
I don't really know, to be honest with you. It's not, and it isn't something we do directly. What we would do is we would introduce successful candidates to relocation partners with whom I suppose we have experience of and would trust. But look, unfortunately, again, it depends where they're coming from. It depends how big the family is. It depends how they bring in the dogs, the cats, the cars. Who knows?
Yeah, of course, yeah. And again, you're back to your how long is the piece of string?
Yeah, but look, I suppose let's face facts. Like for an executive coming to Dublin who wants to live in a sought-after area, let's call it, the biggest thing is going to be the house, right?
Well, it might be the smallest thing, but the biggest price.
There you go. Well said.
Ghosting. Do you ever hear ghosting in your business? Is that when people are offered a job and then, they sit for interviews and then there's nothing happens? Or does that happen often?
It seems to. I guess, one of the things that we would like to believe as a business is it's something that doesn't happen to those who interact with us. It's something that is, I suppose, at the core of what is a very rigorous process. When I talk to people in the market who are looking for opportunities and who see opportunities, for example, what we would call advertised directly on LinkedIn, I would always make the recommendation that rather than just applying for the job, they'd find someone in the company that they can make a connection to. And therefore, it's a human-to-human interaction. And there's a better chance then, I would suggest, of a follow-up regardless of their skill set. Because we don't really know what's in the background reading those applications at the moment when they're going in directly.
That's very interesting. There's a top tip now. Because of course you'll always find somebody who's linked somewhere in a corporation like that.
Yes.
And what should the question be? Would you ask, is this a real job or is this actually happening? Or
yeah, look, that's probably valid. I suppose you'd hope that the vast majority of jobs, once they're advertised, are real and will come to fruition in terms of a placement will be made. But I think the real question is, rather than a question, it's the introduction, it's the interest in the job, it's confirming who is the best person to connect with and confirming that your application will be acknowledged once you've made it.
I'm going to ask you our final question, which is kind of funny when I'm asking a headhunter who he would hire in a heartbeat, because I presume, how many people, just again, I don't know the answer to this,
sure.
Over your headhunting years, how many people have you placed roughly?
I'm going to say 50 plus.
Okay.
So in the last 4 years, yeah.
So you've got plenty of people to choose to hire. Who would you hire in a heartbeat?
Well, it's funny. We touched on rugby earlier. So Paul O'Connell, the Irish coach, is on the tip of my tongue. He spoke at a lunch we hosted last Friday as just such an amazing person to read the room, but then hold the room, with his clarity of expression and getting his points across so well as I stumble getting mine across. But I'm going to sidestep that one if I can and come in with the second one. So the second one is American author James Clear. I don't know if you're familiar with his book Atomic Habits.
Oh, I do. Sorry, I do. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what's very interesting about James Clear is not only the enablement, that we've all gotten from consuming his content, but how he ate his own dog food, how he used his own tricks to market Atomic Habits in the first place. And given where we are with Scale Up Collective and our desire to be known in the market and to add value to the ecosystem, I'd love him to come in and be my right-hand man in terms of bringing us to market and making that impact.
And I take it you've read it?
Absolutely.
Have you adopted it?
I've adopted some of it.
Yeah.
The most basic thing I learned from it was just do something. You need to write a book. You need to read a book, read a page. You need to go for a run. You've got 5 minutes. Walk around the block. Just do something small. even if you don't get outside the house, get your running gear ready. Maybe on day 2 it'll happen for you.
maybe on day 36, maybe not.
Well, as long as you keep going, I suppose it will eventually.
Barry Guiney, who is full-time, you're not full-time secretary of the UCC Rugby Club, no, not yet.
I certainly hope not.
But he is a headhunter with Odgers Bernston, OB. Thank you so much for joining us on That Great Business Show.
Thank you, Colin.
It's all go, like Chrissy Gno on thatgreatbusinessshow.com. That Great Business Show.
De facto, the revolutionary shaving oil, changing the face of shaving. For the smoothest shave of your life, just add water. No more lathering up or cleaning up afterward. Just add a few drops of water and you're ready to go. De facto's blend of all natural oils hydrates and protects your skin. Perfect for all skin types and lasts so much longer than traditional foams or gels. De facto, a shaving revolution. Just add water. Available from selected pharmacies and from defactoshave.com.
And that is it for episode 193 of That Great Business Show. Great business insights and inspiration as always. Maxall, a family-owned business for over 100 years, advertise with us so that you can get the best tips and insights for your business. So return the favour and sign up for their fuel card. It's good for your business. Also sign up for your own personal copy of the podcast at thatgreatbusinessshow.com. Share us, like us, give us 5-star reviews. It does really help. And of course, like you, we're in business, so why not advertise with us? We record at the Dublin South Podcast Studios, where today's studio engineer is Alison, always a delight, O'Dwyer. A huge thanks to her, later studio manager Peter Rice and post-production engineer Neil Horner, triple the treble and double the bass to ensure we remain the world's best-sounding business podcast. So for me, Conal Moran, buchas to you all, agus slán tamil.